Hi guys, it's Nicole here from the Little Craft House. For those of you who don't know me, I own a craft store here in Perth and I like to pop up tutorials showing you how to make and do crafty things. So my main thing that I like to do is polymer clay earrings. I also do a little bit of resining as well, and today's tutorial is sort of a combination of both. I have already pre-made my polymer clay earrings and the tutorial will be showing you how I do the resin doming over the top. So recently over on Instagram, I showed a very quick tutorial showing how I do the resin coating on my earrings. So the resin coating gives a beautiful, beautiful shine and gives a slightly domed effect to the earrings. Some of the ones that I made had metallic paints on them, as well as using metallic clay. So the resin really brought out that beautiful shimmer. My dog's being very noisy. So the resin doming is something that I always get asked questions about. So I thought I would do a full-length tutorial for you showing you how I do it. Now, obviously there's lots of ways to do it. This is my preferred way. So hopefully you can pick up some tips and tricks along the way and have fun doing it too. For today's project, we're going to be using Top Coat resin by a company called Eparency, and we sell this one along with all the other items in our store. So I'm also using a little plastic cup and a pop stick for mixing, and I've also got myself a little plastic pipette here as well. I've prepared my pieces here. As I mentioned earlier, they're already all baked up and ready to be top coated, and I've popped them onto some silicone mats and they're on a baking tray as well, just for me to be able to move them around easy enough. Okay, so I have my little plastic measuring cup here and I'm going to measure out and mix up the resin. So this resin is a really easy one to mix up as it has a 1-to-1 ratio, which means it's equal parts of part A and part B. So I'm going to do 20 mils of part A and 20 mils of part B. Now, I don't think I mentioned before, but this resin is an epoxy resin, which means that it will take a minimum of 24 hours to set, and it generally has a 7-day full cure time as well. So it still has it's still not fully set until after those 7 days. Now, I'll also mention that I am working outside today on my working table, which is quite filthy, as you can see. I like to work outside because it has obviously really good ventilation. I'm also wearing my gloves and a face mask to ensure that I'm not breathing in the chemicals, because resin is a chemical, and a point to note is that it is not recommended for children to use. And whatever resin you are using, I do recommend reading the safety instructions for it, as you want to be as safe as you possibly can when using it. Now you'll notice that my part B here is quite a bit thicker than the part A was, so I'm just going slowly because obviously I don't want to pour too much. I just want to make sure that I'm pouring the right amount. Now I also like to just pour into the 1 cup, because if I do it into 2 cups, you obviously lose the amount of liquid around the outsides of the cups when you combine them, and I don't want to do that. So I just do it straight into the 1 cup. Now, I'm giving it a good stir. I need to stir it for a good couple of minutes to make sure that it is all mixed up nicely. Try not to go too fast when you're stirring your resin. You don't want to add extra bubbles to the mix, because bubbles are not your friend when it comes to resin. Now, if you find you do have quite a few bubbles, we're going to talk through bubbles again afterwards once I've applied it to the pieces, but for now, yep, just kind of a slow mix, making sure that I'm scraping down all edges of the cup and as well as the stirrer, and making sure that I'm getting it all mixed together well. So when you mix 2 clear liquids, obviously it's a bit hard to know when it is mixed properly, but one telltale sign is that you won't have any more of what's referred to as ribbons within the mixture. So that's when you're mixing, you'll notice that there's some little like swirl marks start happening. Once they're all gone, then you know that you've mixed it up well enough. Okay, so usually I like to let my cup sit for just a couple of minutes just to allow those bubbles to reach the surface and kind of come out a little bit before I get my pipette into it. I probably didn't leave it long enough today. There is quite a few bubbles still in the cup, but that's okay. I'm just going to suck the liquid from down deeper and hopefully miss some of those bubbles. So when it comes to the top coating, I actually like to use either a pipette or a syringe. I find that both of these items give me good control over where I'm placing the resin. Now, the top coat resin is a really good one. I also sometimes use Barnes epoxy glass. That is also a good one for the top coating. I find that I get minimal pullback with both of those resins. If you use a different type of resin, a specifically one that's made for casting, you'll find, so like casting in molds, you'll find that they have more of a shrinkage happen. So it will pull away from the edges of your piece and then it leaves kind of gaps around the edge. So that's not what you want. You want it to cover nicely right up to the edge there. Okay, so you'll notice here I'm using a secondary pipette to hold my paste down and stop it from moving. So when we get to the end of this, well, sort of towards the end of this tutorial, I'm going to talk about cleaning your pipettes out. At some stage, they will reach the end of their life, but I don't throw them away. I keep hold of them and then I can use them in this case like this, which helps me to hold and secure the pieces in place. You can also use a let me spit my words out. You could also use a silicone tipped tool if you had one handy, as the resin will just come off of silicone easy once it is cured. You could also use a pop stick as well. Or as I'm trying to keep my second hand out the way here, just apply it without holding the paste down. Unfortunately, it does move a little bit sometimes, but not always. Right, so those pesky bubbles that did form and did come across onto my pieces, I am using a lighter with a flame to just gently wave across the top of the piece, and that will pop any of those bubbles that have surfaced. So usually I would resin all the pieces first and then go over at the end with the lighter. That just gives bubbles time to come to the surface, because sometimes they like to stick to the pieces, which is a little bit annoying. But those ones there were super obvious and I just wanted to get rid of them so that I didn't have to look at them while I continue. Now, if you think these navy blue and gold ones are cute, actually, if you think any of these earrings are cute, jump on over to Instagram, because the tutorial reels for these are up over there, and yeah, then you can have a quick you can see a quick overview of how I made them. So I kind of mentioned it before, but the reason that I like to work on a silicone mat underneath my pieces is that if any resin drips onto the mat, it will easily remove. So I've had an instance before where I didn't use a silicone mat and I just resined my pieces sitting on the tray, and of course it cured and I couldn't remove the pieces from the tray. So I learnt my lesson, and from then on I've always used something underneath. So I like this circular mat here because, yeah, it's a really good size and it has those little honeycomby bits as well, which allows resin to go into those rather than just sitting directly underneath the pieces. Of course, the trick is not to have any spillages. It takes a little bit of practice getting used to how much resin your pieces can take before it spills. It also helps to have your pieces on a flat surface as well, not on an angle, and that way the resin should self-level on the pieces and hopefully it doesn't overflow. Sometimes I do like to push the limit of how much I'm putting on, and yeah, unfortunately that does mean spillages, but just keep an eye on it and hopefully you don't put too much on. Hopefully it doesn't overflow. Now, another question that I always get asked about doming of my polymer clay pieces, I always get asked about the holes. So I like to drill my holes after my resin has cured, and I'm going to go through that at the end of this tutorial properly, but I just thought I would mention it now, just in case you're looking to see whether there are holes in these pieces. I haven't sanded them and I haven't drilled the holes either. So all those finishing elements that I normally do the polymer clay pieces, I do later on. The only thing that I do sometimes do before I resin, and it will depend on the piece, is I do give them a little wipe over with just a damp cloth or baby wipe, just to remove any dust or additional dirt that may be on them if I've stored them before doing the resining. So what I usually like to do is gather up a whole bunch of pieces and put them aside, waiting until I've got enough to do a decent batch all in one go. And as I said before, I've measured out 40 mils today of the resin, but I'm definitely not going to use that. Use it all, sorry. I probably only should have just done about 20 mils in total. My cup doesn't have the 10 mil marking on it, so that's why I did the 40 mil. But yeah, I won't need the full 40 mils at all. Okay, so I'm going to move it over to the second lot here, and I'm just going to talk about this silicone mat for a second. So I think this one I got from a kitchen shop quite a while ago, and I dislike it. I really dislike this one. I'm only using it at the moment because I couldn't find my other round one, but this one is kind of a pain. Sometimes my pieces fall down into those longer strips, so it is most definitely not my favourite to use. Now you will have noticed that I've also sped up the vision here, so this is in 3 times speed, just to speed up that process a bit. Now that I've finished all the doming with the resin, I'm going to just go over them all again with that lighter with the flame, and that's just going to pop any of those bubbles that have surfaced, because there is nothing worse than coming back afterwards after it's cured and finding one of those pesky little bubbles still sitting there. Sometimes you will find that there is a couple of little bubbles that want to hold on, especially if you're using a charm like this, and the bubble's actually on the surface of the clay and it's not rising up. Sometimes if you're tapping, you can tap the tray, which will cause a bit of a vibration, which might move the bubble. Otherwise, I grab a toothpick like I'm doing here and just maneuver those bubbles around until they surface, and then that way you can just pop them with the toothpick. Now, once I've finished with these bubbles, I'm going to pop my tray to the side, and then I'm going to move on to clean up. So when it comes to cleanup, alcohol is actually one of the best things to use. I like these alcohol wipes. Otherwise, isopropyl alcohol also works really well. I'm just wiping over the exterior of my pipette while squeezing out every little bit of internal resin that I can, and I'll also wipe down my stirring sticks and the inside of my cup. Now today I had a little bit of resin left in that cup, which I'm just going to pop into some molds so that I'm not going to waste it. And when I store the pipette, I'll store it facing upright so that the bulge is down the bottom, so that any resin will drip down into that bulge and I can reuse the pipettes again. So you can really start to see how much better these pieces are starting to look by having that resin on top of them. It really brings out the colour, and it's a bit hard to see here, but the shimmer and shine of those clays and the metallic paint, it just looks amazing. Now, I'm not sure if you spotted it too, but that hamster hand in the middle there, I've overflowed the resin and it has leaked underneath of it. So because the silicone mat is there, it's not completely sitting in that spill. But what I am going to do is get my toothpick here, and I'm just going to move my pieces around and just try and move that hand out of the main overflow there, just so limit the amount that's going to stick to the piece. So the next important step, especially because I'm working outside, is I'm going to pop them to the side and cover the pieces. I've got a container here which I'll just pop upside down over the top, and that will stop any dirt, dust, or even bugs from landing in the resin while it's curing. So it's now a week later and I am back to finish off the earrings. So as far as I can see, I haven't had any issues with pullback, which I'm very grateful for, and they just look so beautiful. The resin's gone nicely to the edge, which was what we're wanting, and it has got that beautiful domed shine on top. Now the colours in these Hamza hands is beautiful. This was one of the new Sculpey polymer clay colours, Wild Orchid. It's just beautiful with the metallic gold. Now this one here is the one that I had the overflow issue with. As you can see, a little bit of it's gone onto the back, but I should be able to just scratch that off here and just pop it off. It shouldn't take too much. I'll probably just do that afterwards. If you find that you do have a lot of issues with overflowing your resin, you can always look into liquid latex, which is a product that you can apply to the back of your pieces, and that helps to just easily peel that resin off if it does overflow. So when I was doing cleanup, I spoke about the pipettes and what to do to make them reusable again. This is that pipette that I was showing you, and even though it does have a couple of little bits of resin still stuck on the inside there, it is still able to be, I can still squeeze the top here and the airflow is still sucking in and out. So I will be able to use that pipette again. So I decided that with this tutorial today, I will also include the, I suppose, post-resining procedures that I do to make them into those earring components, or the usable earring components. I'm just going to quickly admire my own work here first because I'm really just loving how they've all turned out. But in just a moment, I'm going to go through how I sand down my pieces and then how I do the drilling of the holes. So these sorts of things are things I've been questioned quite a bit about, so I just thought I would include them in this tutorial. You'll also find that in other tutorials I go through those elements after I have made my pieces. Sometimes I don't cover all those parts, so I just thought I would go through it again today. I'm now going to drill the holes in my pieces so that I can attach the toppers to them. So I have a piece of wood here which I drill into, and I use my Dremel drill. So I'll just show you that one there. That's my drill that I use, and it has an attachment on it which is a thin drill, a small drill bit. So it drills the holes a size of approximately 1.5 to 2 millimeters. I'm not in my normal positioning here, so it is a little bit awkward for me, but I'm going to try my best so I can show you. Actually, I've just changed the positioning of my camera setup here, just so it's a little bit easier to show you without my hands blocking the way. And I'll just turn my camera sound down so that you can actually hear me rather than just the drilling. So I like to drill my holes approximately 2 millimeters down from the top of my piece. This means that there's enough clay around the top to not be too brittle, gives it that stability. It also means that there's enough room for me to add a jump ring in and have the piece hang underneath, or hang it from the topper, and have enough room that the pieces are able to move nicely without bumping into each other. So because we're drilling these pieces that have resin on top, it is important that we've let it have the full 7 days cure time. That just means that the resin is fully set, and this will mean less chance of it separating away from the polymer clay, and it also means that you're not disturbing those chemicals while you're drilling through. So the next step is to do the sanding. So I use my same Dremel drill, but I just need to remove my drill bit that I have in and replace it with the buffing tool. So I thought I'd just show you me switching this over. I'm holding down I suppose it's a release button at the top there with my thumb, which is allowing me to take out those pieces, and then that's what like locks it in place. So I'm just holding that down whilst I'm tightening it. And so the piece that I'm using is a buffing tool, so it's like a really soft felt pad. I find that's all I need to sand my polymer clay earrings with. So even though these have been resined on top, I'm actually not going to be sanding anywhere near the resin. I just like to sand the underneath of the pieces. This will take off any of the bits left over from when I cut them out. So it just smooths it off and makes it nice and smooth and neat. So I should also mention that during this process, I like to wear a dust face mask, just because there is a lot of polymer clay dust floating around. So I also try and do this away from my making area because I don't want all those little dusty bits to end up in my raw polymer clay. So I'm just speeding up the vision here for you. I'm just getting through it quickly, but you'll slowly start to see, especially because I'm using the dark coloured clays, well not this one, but the other ones are quite dark coloured, you'll start to see the build-up of dust start happening on my fingers. It's quite amazing how much actually does come off during this process. And so when it comes to the sanding and the drilling, I actually don't have a preference of what to do first. What I generally do is whatever drill attachment my drill has on it is the step that I do first. Probably just because I'm a little bit lazy and there's no point changing it over, because ultimately it's not going to make a difference whether we sand the pieces first or drill them. So yeah, I'll just do whatever's already on my drill. And so I just mentioned before about the dust on my hands. It's quite obvious here how much dust has actually gone all over my hands. I'm just going to use one of my alcohol wipes just to now wipe over all the pieces again, because not only are my hands covered in the dust, but the pieces are too. So just give them a nice little clean up. So now for the next bit is the assembling of the pieces. So I've got my jump rings here. 8mm is my preferred size. So I've got that in a couple of colours. I've also got my findings box here, which has a few different charms, and I also have these really cool little feature stud tops. So they already have the backings attached to them, and yeah, they're really easy to use because you don't have to worry about then gluing your posts and things on. You can just attach them straight on and the earrings are done. So they're one of my favourite findings to use. So I'm going to use the golds and blacks for some of these pieces. I should have prepared myself a little bit better earlier because I don't have all the ones that I wanted, but that's okay. We'll just make do and see what I do have. So I also like to arrange my pieces on my tile so that I can work out what I'm going to do for each one. So I don't always have a plan when I begin making things of what I'm going to do, or if I do have a plan, I do tend to change things quite a few times over. I seem to be missing a hexagon, so I have no idea where it would have gone. I just need to find that before we continue. Okay, crisis averted. He had fallen on the floor. Right, so back to organising my pieces. I'm just going to lay them all out, put the toppers above the ones that are or where I want them to be. So the gold looked really good with that one because it's got the gold paint on it. I'm going to pop some black ones up here. I've also got these tassels. I've had these in my stash for quite a while now. They're quite cute. I'm just going to take them off the backing piece here. Now, I won't throw the backing cardboard away. I might save that because then I can use it for something like silk screening later. try and reuse everything as much as I possibly can. So some days I could literally spend hours just mixing and matching findings, just working out what goes best with each piece. I also have a box of acrylic toppers as well. I'm trying to resist going over to that for these ones because I think I like the metal look better with these ones. However, I'm thinking that colourful pair down the bottom, I may do maybe like a pink glittery acrylic for that one. So I might leave that one for now and come back to that at another stage. I'm also going to get some hooks out of this container. These are really good hooks. They've got the large loop at the bottom, so I don't need a jump ring. I can just loop them straight on. So they're also nice and easy to use. So I'm going to use them for the shell. I don't think the shell needs anything extra. I think it kind of speaks for itself, which is really nice. And I'm up to now the final part, which is actually assembling them all together. So just a bit of a super sped up version here, just because it does take quite a bit of time. But yeah, I'm just using my pliers and popping them together. And so we're pretty much at the end of my little tutorial today. Hopefully that has given you some tips and tricks into doing your resin doming on the tops of your polymer clay earrings. If you've enjoyed this tutorial today, I would absolutely love it if you could like and subscribe to my channel. I'd also love if you popped over and visited me over on Instagram. I pop up daily inspiration and tutorials over there. I also do shop updates as well. The majority of items that I've used today are available in our store, so I'll pop a link in the description of today's video. So I'd like to say a huge thank you once again for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've had lots of fun, and I'll hopefully see you again soon. Bye for now.